we discovered a massive need for women to find an identity surrounding being a woman and an entrepreneur. I'm Marley.
And I'm Rachel. Women like us, women who are the primary earners in our families,
are searching for identity, community, visibility, permission.
A place to be heard and supported.
We are leading with our vulnerability to allow others to feel safe.
We are strong
and feminine. We are bread-winning women.
Hey everybody, I'm so excited. Are you excited, Marley?
Okay, English, Marley. Excited because last night, and if you saw the email that Rachel sent out earlier, we had like breakdown to breakthrough, and that's what we're talking about today.
Whew, that was intense, wasn't it?
It was, and like a level of our friendship that we haven't been to before. So yeah, it's like, I always have this, like whenever I go to an event or some sort of like learning opportunity, I always have this like hangover after of all this knowledge and processing. And that was one of those really great conversations in our friendship too, that even the day after is still like, wow, like letting it sink in and integrate and process it because of the breakthroughs that we had from it. And like sometimes those breakthroughs can be painful, but because of the level of respect that Rachel and I have for each other is also really empowering.
So one of the things that's really crazy, and I think we should give some of like just the backstory about friendships in general, because people might be like, wait, did you guys have a fight yesterday?
Did we break up?
No, we didn't break up. Thankfully, we did not have a fight. One of the things that we actually did was intentionally circumvent potential issues, because here's the fact of the matter. In life, very few things are promised, but one that is promised is there are going to be hiccups. Like, I don't know if anyone ever said that. If no one's ever quoted it, I can promise you in life there are going to be hiccups. Things are going to go wrong. Communication falls through sometimes. And in the past, what I've learned from friendships is kind of a tough lesson. I know that we've both experienced friendships that have left us feeling betrayed or broken. Let down. For me, it goes back to a time where every like best friend that I had chosen in my life, for them, it didn't mean like do or die, ride or die, best friends forever. When they said best friends for life, it didn't actually mean that. It was more like best friends until we get into a disagreement, or best friends until we don't see eye to eye on something. And so what I had learned about friendship is that it's a very fragile thing, and you have to be careful to not get into disagreements. And we kind of experienced something last night. Not that it was a disagreement. We were in agreement on everything, but we could have been scared to talk about things. Or let me rephrase that. I could have been scared to talk about things because
it's confrontation.
Right, exactly. Avoiding confrontation in order to make sure that your friendships aren't affected. Marley, you've had interesting friendship relationships too, right? Like crazy lessons being taught.
Yeah, well, and patterns of friendships. And I always believe that when there's patterns, you are the denominator of every single one. So if something keeps happening to you, like it's the same circumstance, just with different people, obviously there's something that you're doing. So is this a pattern of a relationship you keep going back to, even though you know that it's not good for you? Is it a lesson that you haven't learned yet? And sometimes those circumstances are going to keep getting harder until you finally learn that lesson. And so for me, it was so important to find friendships and actually get out of that pattern. So when I met Rachel, and Rachel is someone who obviously means the world to me, love you, that it's so important to make sure that those friendships stay strong. And it's also rare to find someone that just feels like an extension, a duplicate, a clone of you. So those friendships are something that you can't take for granted and have to hold on to so tightly.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's really interesting is there's the whole like chicken and an egg thing, you know? Did I experience, and this is for anyone watching or listening, did I experience failed friendships or friendships that let me down because of other people? Did I experience it because I let other people down and caused those things to happen in my life? Did it happen because you bonded with the wrong people? And I think the answer can sometimes be a combination of all of those. I know that for myself in the past, I'm very fast to trust, which is not always a good thing. Anyone else that way? Marley, I think, or you're a little more
the opposite. And I think that some people, I mean, a lot of us, it's interesting that you say that you're fast to trust, because people who have been burned in the past are usually slow to trust and think, I have to work my way in slowly to be able to understand this person and reveal parts of who I am. But now, since I think I've healed from that, I would rather shift that scenario so that I do trust, because I would rather have a relationship where I gave my all and I didn't have regrets about I didn't show up enough, I wasn't there for them enough, I wasn't my best self because I was so scared of being hurt that I was guarded. I would rather be vulnerable and experience fully than to hold myself back and have regrets that it didn't actually live to its full potential because of how I was being too guarded and too afraid of being hurt. You're in life, you're going to get scrapes and bumps and bruises, and you're going to get hurt, but that only means that you loved fully.
And it's really crazy how you're talking about like the patterns and how what you've experienced with your friendships. I know most of us have probably experienced good friendships, bad friendships. Maybe you've been a bad friend. Maybe I've been a bad friend at times. But then you have to learn, how do I adjust without accidentally swinging completely with the pendulum? Like, for example, someone who's very trusting, like Marley said, might ultimately end up becoming very cynical, because then you get burned more easily when you're quick to trust. So one of the things that comes to mind is, okay, how do I incrementally make better decisions versus completely swinging the pendulum? Or if you're someone who's super, super cynical and you're like, I can't be this way because I'm not bonding with the people that I want to be friends with naturally, instead of swinging the pendulum and becoming 100% trusting, which I think that swing is harder to do, you don't necessarily want to do that. You instead want to say, I want someone to prove me right. When you meet that person that you say, this could be a lifelong friend, this is somebody that I could potentially trust. Now, one of the things that we're going to be totally open and honest and vulnerable about was a miscommunication that we had, or let me rephrase that, a non-communication about something that was really interesting, something that triggered me and brought up the fear of, oh my goodness, what if this just ends up like another friendship where we end up not working out as friends? And it scared me so much. And it was something that was absolutely not intentional. Now, the crazy thing is how I reacted to it was what impacted Marley.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share like what you sensed on issues? Oh,
very good. I called Rachel. So this happened actually 2 days ago, and I'm going to let you tell, because I don't know how deep you want to go here. But I had a moment where, I mean, we had like a little, and I'm going to quote Stacy Martino, a kerfuffle. But it wasn't even a kerfuffle. It was just like, oops, like little miscommunication. But at the time I was just like, oops, like that was it. And Rachel being, of course, so like energetic and happy and bubbly that she was, I was just meeting that energy of like, oops. And then what I didn't know was Rachel's reaction to it. And I actually still didn't know until, I love our husbands so much. Our husbands talked, and I actually don't know the conversation, but what I took from the outside was that Paul subtly said something to Wayne, who subtly said something to me. And I just called Rachel, and like, it wasn't even like a, hey, what's going on? Or are you mad at me? It was just like, hey, let's talk. I love you, and I want to make sure that you're okay. And then from there, like, there were tears. And I always love our little like love fest, little text conversations or FaceTimes, because then it was, first of all, clearing up what had happened in a very loving way. But then also me having a moment where I was like, Rachel, you don't get to do that to me, because if here's me just like still throughout the 2 days of being like, like here's life and it's amazing and here's what we're doing, and still running our businesses together and separately, and being friends and talking throughout the entire day throughout that, and not knowing what was going on. And then coming back to Rachel and being like, I had no idea what you were feeling for the last 2 days, so you didn't allow me to be there for you. And I understand you were upset, but there's also part of me that's upset because you didn't let me in.
isn't that crazy, you guys? And we like had this like moment of bawling, and it was a good thing. This wasn't us fighting. This was us saying, I love you. Like, let's fight for this friendship. A small, tiny little thing triggered a fear that had happened in the past. Have you ever had that happen where something that is a pattern in your life or something you've seen from other people, maybe it's a good person, maybe it's a good potential relationship, maybe it's a good friend, and they do something that triggers those fears or those deep wounds that you've had in the past, and suddenly something that was a tiny little thing starts to build a seed in your heart, and you're like, can I trust that person? Do I need to cut that person out? Do I need, like, is this going to turn into the same pattern I've seen happen over and over again? And the crazy thing is, what our husbands did was an ultimate act of love. And so even though there wasn't this like massive fight, there, like, the crazy thing is, this is all such a small thing. And what Paul sensed was that I was taking those deep wounds I've had in the past from friendships and starting to be like fearful, like, is this going to happen in my friendship? And then I distanced myself from Marley for the next 24 hours. That's how long this whole process happened. And she called me as soon as Paul called Wayne. Wayne talked to Marley. And thankfully, they fought for us when it was something small. But here's something that we had set up in our friendship and our husbands brought us back to early on. Mm-hmm. When you have a friend that is a ride or die friend, backs against the wall, we've got each other, I've got your back, you've got my back, you have to talk about things when they are small. You have to straight up talk about everything. You have to say, this is my fear. Like, this is the deep thing behind it, so that your friends know your heart. Now, this isn't for everyone. This isn't for every single person you meet along your day, your Starbucks barista. It hurt my feelings when you didn't put whipped cream on my coffee. I'm so hurt. This is not what I'm talking about. The reality is, there are a couple people in your life, whether it's a spouse, a partner, a best friend, a sister. And when you love those people, you need to fight for open communication, especially if you're going to do business together or manage finances together with a partner or a spouse. You have to talk about things, because when you talk about them calmly on the front end, it prevents massive big blowouts from happening. And thankfully, my husband is very big into communication and self-awareness. So is Wayne, Marley's husband. And what they ultimately did was they said, hold up, this could become something later on, because there's a seed that is being planted right now. We need to nip it in the bud right now. And thankfully, they kind of saw my blind side. They saw Marley's blind side. They were able to bring us together. But we've had this policy in our friendship. And this is the first time where for a moment I was nervous. I was like, oh, what's happening? What's going on? The reality is, you need to be able to communicate openly, even if it's as simple as, hey, when you said this, I kind of felt this way. And this has nothing to do with you. This has to do with my past, my wounds I've experienced, the patterns I've seen from people, but I want to make you aware of it. That is what I should have done. And in the past, we've had those open conversations. For some reason, this time it didn't happen. There were quite a few layers to this interesting situation. But the reality is, those open conversations are what keep your inner circle close.
Mm-hmm. And so there was that 24 hours of just complete ignorance, because I had no idea. And then when I found out, going to Rachel to, first of all, top priority, making sure that everything is stable, that she understands that our friendship is on the most solid foundation and that there's nothing on my end that would ever shake that. Then also going to her and saying, okay, now that we've, secured this foundation and reassured each other that this is still stable, we need to talk about this moving forward, because that 24 hours for me, finding out after, broke my heart to feel like I wasn't there for my best friend just because I didn't know. And can you imagine if I still didn't know, and it was like weeks or months or even years later? And I'm sure that you can relate to where, like, even just in a marriage or parents or family or your kids, where there's like these things that pile up, and yes, they're small, But then like a year later, it's like, well, there was that one time that you left the toothpaste off the, like, what is this even about? Like, you have no idea. And so this was the smallest little thing that to me, I was like, I had no idea you were upset about that. And also just like, again, we probably won't go too into the details, but it had something to do with like a response from someone else that wasn't even like total third party. And it just, like, for me, had no idea. But then knowing Rachel's story, knowing Rachel's background, and even for me, like I'll share something after, the ways that we have been brought up, the circumstances, the situations we've had, of course, can trigger a fear, because we have all of these stories. We have how we were brought up, things that people did to us, experiences we've been in. So for me, something that I might be like, and of course, this is how you can approach a friendship. That's no big deal. Just calm down. It's nothing. But for me to actually go into her shoes and feel sympathetic of, this is what happened to her, and this is something that has happened in the past. This is a pattern that has shown up for her. My duty as a best friend is to reassure her and show her that this isn't going to happen again, or that this is something that if it were to happen in the future is, no, remember that I'm your best friend and I have your heart. There was even like something that happened to us in the past when you were having the baby. Rachel was gracefully taking her rest. She was stepping away. And that also meant that there was some quiet moments in our friendship where I was like, Rachel, where are you? Are you okay? Are you mad at me? What's going on? Because my past, I've had histories of friendships that just ghosted, or like boyfriends. You know how that goes, unfortunately. So it was just like checking in of like, Rachel, you're ghosting right now. Is it just because of the baby? Are you just napping more often? Which if you are, that's good. I'm happy for you, but I just need to know. So there's even things like that where you just do a check-in and you just do a perception check of, is this what's going on with you? Because here's how I'm feeling. Okay, good. And for most of the time when this happens, it's one of those just, oh gosh, no, I didn't know you were feeling that. No, it's totally fine. Here's what's happening for me. And then both of us can go, oh, okay, we're good. And I feel like that's important in any relationship.
Absolutely. So when you find those people where you say, this is my inner circle, these are the people that I can truly trust. They want nothing but good for me. They love me, and vice versa. There are two phases of communication that need to happen, communication and really healing. So there's first and foremost, recognizing that there's layers in everything. There is the short term, the situation, the tiny little thing that triggers a massive reaction. Then there's the long term, and that's those deep wounds that every single person carries. And yes, you need to work on the short term, the situation, etc., but you also need to dive on in to the long term and determine that you're going to ultimately find healing. So we could have just ended it with, let's just figure out this one situation, this tiny little hiccup. But instead, we're like, you know what? We are lifers. And so through this process, we're going to become safe spaces for one another to get vulnerable and handle those deep core wounds, the things that really have messed with future relationships too in the past. That's really deep. Future relationships in the past. But the reality is you need to be able to have someone who says, I love you so much that I recognize this isn't just about the here and now. This isn't just about this situation. There's more. There's stuff behind this conversation. Like, who hurt you? How did this happen? Where does that fear stem from? And an amazing, amazing best friend, partner, spouse will be open to going on that relationship journey with you, that healing journey. It might be one person, it might be two or three, but there's something so beautiful about someone else saying, I care about you more than just this situation now. I want you to learn to trust again in the right scenarios.
And be able to heal the past situations, to go, this is not your belief system now. This is something that happened to you. You've moved through it. You have learned the lesson. You are a new person that wouldn't put yourself in situations like that anymore. You don't attract those people anymore because you are a different person now. And so being able to even dig deep on that, even though it might be painful, that's the breakdown to break through.
It's been so amazing. I've experienced this in our friendship, which it isn't even that old, which is crazy, but we've already decided, and not just decided, we have committed to being lifelong best friends. You guys know the difference, right? Like there's deciding and saying it, and like, that's cool. It's great for social media, but then there's committing. And it's, Marley and I aren't married, but we're pretty darn close. So we've got, our spouses, we've got our partners, the lifer, the person that you're going to do things with forever. The same thing can be true with that close best friend, the person who is your inner circle. You can't give up just because it's hard. You can't give up because you had a kerfuffle. All in, as Stacy, I love how we always quote Stacy. Stacy says, all in means all in, with a couple extra words in there.
Have some profanity in there, because you are all in.
Yep. All.
And even when it feels hard, when it feels uncomfortable, commitment doesn't care how you feel. This is something that you have committed to, because you see something in this, whether it's the happiness, it's someone showing you how the person that you want to be. This is the person that's helping you to get there. And Rachel and I, it's so funny that you brought up, like, it seems like we've been friends forever, but I was actually just thinking, I met you in person for the first time in September last year. So was it October? No, Boise it was September at the Viral launch party. So that was September. And I was thinking it'll be funny when Facebook reminds me, like how it brings back the memories. It'll be so crazy to repost that. I'm already thinking about social media, the content, that I'll be like, can you believe we only met a year ago? Obviously, we've been in each other's lives for longer than that, but just meeting in person and then see each other every single month since, more than we actually see people who are local to us, which is kind of crazy, but that's our commitment. That's what we love about each other.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think is so huge is when you evaluate your relationships in your life, there's a difference between someone who has good intentions and whose heart is good and who is there for you, and someone who is toxic and dangerous. Like, there's a very big difference. So when you have those people that you've committed to being all in for, I think it's really easy, especially for those of us who come from, let's say, like broken families or broken relationships. That's more of my background. My parents were divorced when I was 18, and I obviously became a single mom after a big relationship broke up. So when you have that pattern in your life, it can be so easy to naturally assume that someone who actually really loves you is just falling into that pattern again. So sometimes you actually have to step back as the person who's triggered, as the person who's scared, the person who is used to a pattern of things breaking apart. You have to step back and say, am I letting this tiny thing derail a potentially amazing relationship? And could we overcome it through just some small communication? Kind of crazy to think. But when I think about what could have happened, I mean, think about this, you guys. That small thing could have happened. I let it trigger me. What if Paul and Wayne hadn't communicated to help bridge the gap, and we were still kind of distant? And then I started to let things stack upon it because now I'm scared. And now all of a sudden, before you know it, we're distant from each other and we're not best friends anymore. Oh my gosh. That's a really scary and dramatic reaction, but it is a pattern that can be natural to some of us. So instead, what if we can nip it in the bud when it's tiny, and instead prevent a big old kerfuffle from happening, a big distancing from people who truly love us and want to have the best for us?
A lot of people fall into self-sabotage patterns because they just go back into, well, this is what happened to me in the past. So if A plus B equals C, and I'm seeing A, I don't even want to get to C. I'm not even going to let B happen. But it doesn't have, I just came up with, that was great math. Just
You know what's so funny? Paul said the same thing about me. He said, oh my gosh, okay, geek out moment for a second. My best friend and my husband are so aligned. It's hilarious. Paul said, and if this sounds familiar and we're watching this live, like, comment on this. He says, you see A happen and your mind goes to Z. You don't even think about all of the stuff and realizing it was only A that happened. Z hasn't happened. Isn't that crazy? You just said it too. That's where my mind naturally goes. This happened. This must mean the world's over. We're going bankrupt. Everything is done. I'm losing all my hair. Like, no, I lost a hair and now I'm losing all my hair. So the reality is that we sometimes let our triggers blow things up. And I can't believe you and Paul said the same thing independently.
So weird. And that happens, like, it happens more than once. So funny.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what I challenge you to do is to step back and look at the people who have your best life in mind, people who care about your best version of yourself, the people who care about your best experiences, the people who love you truly, and recognize, are you allowing little things to get in the way of it remaining an amazing, great part of your inner circle, letting that person in? Sometimes the fears that we have, we end up pushing people away 100% from the potential that we have as friends, as partners, as spouses, as family, you know?
You can't afford to let that relationship go. So many people don't enter relationships because they're so afraid to be hurt. And what are they missing out on? I don't want you to miss out on that either.
Absolutely. So we wanted to share that with you guys. We are happy to be vulnerable for you so that you feel
open to being vulnerable yourself. Lead with your vulnerability. The fact that we could come together in this private conversation that happened and be vulnerable about, here's how I'm feeling, this is what happened. We can share that experience so that you can get through that too, because when you lead from vulnerability, you are able to make other people feel safe. And so if we're able to allow that for you and help you get through your triggers, help you get through your relationships, that's what we're here for, sister.
We got it. All right, breadwinning women, we will see you next week at approximately, I say approximately because life is a curious thing, approximately 3 p.m. Central on Wednesday next week. We'll see you later.